So I'm a Boy Scout, and as you know, we go on camping trips. But this experience made me drop out. It was around October in 2011 when we went. About 7 of us plus 3 adults went on a camping trip. We were supposed to stay there from Friday to Sunday. So we got there Friday night and pitched our tents, 2 to a tent, and went to sleep. The next day we ate, did some work and practice stuff in our handbooks. I was first class. So that night one of our leaders said, "Let's go for a hike." We were kind of uneasy about it since it was 8 us and it was dark. But he said that he had taken many troops up this trail before we came along. Only thing he left out that we found out later was that he only took them during the day. So we packed a few things for the hike and were off by 8:30. The trail was up a mountain a pretty far distance that he said we could clear and get back by 11. We walked away from the campsite and towards the trail, passing a train tracks on the way and finally reaching the entrance. He did a head count and lead us up. About 10 mins into the hike, someone said they had to use the bathroom. He walked to a tree and went. He came back looking kind of spooked. We asked what was wrong and he said he saw something. Our leader just said it must have been a deer, but I could tell from the look on his face that what he saw was no deer. We continued, almost all of us, a little paranoid, just looking out, shining our flashlights out into the woods and looking behind our backs, all just to make sure nothing was out there. About halfway up, our leader stopped and started searching the woods. I asked him if everything was okay. All he replied with was yes, and told us to walk ahead of him. As we began to near the top, the person in the front halted to a stop, almost making us crash into each other. He claimed he heard something breathing just a little bit off the trail. We all glanced our lights out there, looking, but nothing was seen. By then, we all wanted to turn around and head back to the site, but our leader had already set his mind on getting to the top. Around 5 mins later, we heard a loud growl right on top of the next cliff. We froze in place, looking at our leader, trying to figure out what it was. But before we could even think about going back down there, came a hailstorm of rocks crashing down from the cliff. We quickly turned and ran back down. Running and running, it felt like forever, and the whole time I could hear something big and heavy following close behind. Finally, we saw the train tracks. We darted across and through the other side back up to the campsite. When we got there, the other 2 leaders quickly ran to use, asking what happened. Our leader said that something was out there. It began throwing rocks at Use, and he paused looking around and noticed someone was missing. Frantic, we came to a conclusion that we would go look for him while someone stays back and calls an ambulance. We ran the whole way back to the tracks. Searching the tracks up and down, we saw nothing, so we carefully went back up the trail. It took us around 30 minutes to get back to where we was noticing the rocks that could have killed us. Hopeless, we went back down. When we reached the tracks, I noticed something weird. It was a trail of blood going up the tracks way past where we've ever been. As we followed it, we began to hear moaning. Finally, in the distance, we saw him laying in the middle of the tracks. Both of his legs were broken, bones sticking out and everything. He had 3 claw marks on his back. Confused, we sent a few back to the site to tell them we found him, and around the same time came the ambulance. With the little time we had, we tried to ask him what happened and how he could have possibly gotten all the way down here alone. But he was in shock and could speak. He survived, and after a while he was discharged from the hospital. We tried asking him about that fateful day. Never once did he tell us what happened to him, and never again did our leader take anyone up that trail. I went to a camp on Lake Michigan from the age of 7 to 17 in the mid-90s to very early 2000s. We had a camp counselor that was in the Army Rangers. He would make us walk up to 15 miles every other day. One time we walked in the woods away from the lake, starting at the shore. After about 3 hours of walking, all the kids were sweating and breathing heavy, and the hard-ass counselor let us rest. One kid said he heard something ahead, and no one had heard anything. Disregarding the authority of Mr. Army Man and the rest of us, he bolted towards the sounds. We all chased him, kind of worried, but the counselor was freaking out and yelling. He was out of sight for about 5-8 minutes. Then we heard him yell, "Hey guys, come check this out." We all ventured forward to the sound of his voice. As we came to what he had found, we all were shocked to see the most perfect square-shaped house ever, with a ghostly white hue to the paint and the darkest black roof. There was minor decay to the paint and chipping, other than that the house was pristine. He was standing on the porch, door open in front of him with his jaw dropped. The camp counselor asked him if he had opened the door. He replied, "No, sir." We all walked forward toward the door. He ran inside and up to the second floor. I envied him at the moment for being so fearless. As I walked up to the door, heart pounding from the exercise and fear, I saw the walls on both floors covered in taxidermy. The house appeared to be built straight from the early 1900s, maybe even earlier. The fireplace was roaring with a bright flame. Keep in mind this was summer, mid-afternoon. The shapes of the carved wood at the fireplace was unearthly, and the counselor even noted that, with a "what the fuck is that supposed to be?" It was the fireplace, or one of the stuffed animals he was talking about. We could recognize some of the animals, and others seemed to be from another world. Even the army ranger was scared at this point, mainly because the child who had discovered that unsettling house had vanished. Only the counselor and the child who found the house had crossed the door frame. The rest of us watched from the oversized door. The counselor was yelling frantically looking for the child as we heard footsteps toward the back of the second floor. As the counselor ascended the steps and went back to the sound of the footsteps, we heard him yell, "Kids, run now! Go!" We all ran, and he was behind us watching. The kid who had run into this house was missing. The counselor kept yelling, "Fuck!" and other curse words. He was mumbling to himself by the time we reached the camp. He went straight to the head of the camp and explained what happened. The cops were called and a search party was organized, and we all sat back at the camp worried with some. In our cabin, crying. Our army ranger seemed to be losing it. He wouldn't tell us what he saw. He left the camp the next day with the kid still missing. Here's where it gets even weirder. The kid was found alive, walking down the side of the road 45 miles to the north of the camp. His parents were at the camp freaking out and lashing out at the staff. He was brought back to the camp and was going home early. He came to us and said goodbye, but something was wrong with him. He had a vacant stare and his voice no longer sounded as it did before this. We were instructed not to ask about the incident. We were also asked by the camp not to say anything to our parents. This camp was named Camp Blodgett. I think I misspelled the name, but I had attended this camp pretty much my entire childhood. I've never spoke about this, but as it's been over 18 years, I figured I should say something now. I don't know if it was some elaborate joke the adults played on us or if it was real. I have always loved camping. There is something about being out in a tent away from electronics and everyday life that gives me a sort of reminder that I'm not totally dependent on civilization and phones to survive. I know that not bringing my phone is where I made my biggest mistake, but hey, it's Michigan. We don't have scary predators here that cause me to worry, and I knew these particular woods very well. Never experienced anything bad before, so I figured it was as safe of a place to be. It was my younger brother Todd, my sister Amy, and her husband Don and me. All of us agreed. No phones, just tents, beer, and a relaxing time away from life. Well, I thought it was going to be relaxing. You can choose to believe what you will, but this did happen, and my life is never going to be the same. We all rode together in my sister's van and parked at the site we used to party at as teenagers. Even camped here a few times, but had about 5 more people with us. Ugh, the spider spot, really? Amy complained. When we first found this spot years before, there was an old stump that was littered with wolf spiders. We burned it to the ground after waking up to big nasty spiders all over us after a night of drinking. So we named it the Spider Spot. Come on, that stump's gone. Besides, it's only a quarter-mile walk and my feet have been killing me from work. Todd sighed. We all grabbed our shit and started walking the 10-15-minute walk, looking forward to the fire and, of course, beer. The worst part of the walk was the damn broken branches that seemed to jump out just to stab your face and break off. After we finally got there, we did the usual setting tents up and grabbed firewood so the rest of the night would be filled with beer, laughter, then bed, after about 25 creepy nighttime pissing trips. It must have been around 1:30 a.m. when things started getting weird. "Hey, did you guys hear that?" Don asked, shushing everyone. We sat quietly, and after a few seconds, heard the unmistakable sound of laughter. "Just some other campers, man, probably doing the same thing we are," I answered with a laugh. Without warning, Todd shouted loudly to the people, "Got any more beer?" We all laughed and shushed him. We were having a blast and didn't think anything of it. Then we heard running. "What the hell, Todd, you pissed them off?" Amy started to panic a little. "Don't worry, Amy. They are probably drunk, just wanting to talk." Don comforted her, but you could see the worried look on his face as the footsteps got closer. My heart was beating out of my chest, thinking we were going to get into a drunken brawl. "Got any more beer?" It sounded like a weird recording of Todd, only different. "What the fuck?" All of the hair on my arms stood on end. It really creeped me out. "Very funny assholes," Todd shouted. Then more running footsteps, only this time away from our campsite. "Must be drunk teenagers messing with us." Amy breathed a sigh of relief. We all kind of nodded and agreed it was time for bed. That was kind of a buzzkill and I think creeped us out a little. "Hey, I'm sleeping in your tent, bud," Todd said kind of with a nervous glance around the darkness. "Pussy," I said with a laugh but was secretly happy not to have to rough it out alone. Once we all were in our tents, it was very quiet. It was the only time I can remember being kind of scared. I must have dozed off because I woke up to Todd shaking me. "Dude, listen," he whispered quietly. At first, there was nothing. Then I heard the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. It sounded right outside my tent, like a foot away. "I'm sleeping in your tent tonight, booed." Again, it sounded like Todd, only not like him. I was about to shit my pants. Todd looked at me in horror, and I must have had the same look on my face because I was petrified. Then we heard the running again, and whatever it was, it ran off again. "Let's hurry, get the fuck out of here," Don shouted to my surprise. They must have been listening to whatever it was too. We all jumped out of our tents and ran back to the van as quick as possible. I've never felt more relieved to be out of the woods.